Welcome to the Open Science Micro e-learning course from GP2, a resource program of the Aligning Science Across Parkinson's initiative. My name is Dana Lewis, and I'm a program officer at Aligning Science Across Parkinson's and a member of the ASAP Open Science team. This course will discuss ASAP's view on open science best practices across the research lifecycle. We will provide an introduction to open science, including what open science is, why it is important, and a high-level overview of open science best practices across the research lifecycle. Let's jump right in. Open science is a multifaceted movement that aims to make the processes and outputs of scientific research findable, accessible, and reusable, with the goal of accelerating the pace of scientific discovery by allowing others to build upon the work of those who came before. Increasingly, definitions of open science are extending beyond transparency of scientific knowledge towards goals of increased collaboration and rigor through open science infrastructures and interaction with communities. So, why do we believe in promoting open science across the ASAP initiative? We believe that by supporting collaboration, facilitating research enabling resource generation, and creating a culture of data sharing, we can deliver faster and better outcomes for Parkinson's disease research. To achieve these goals of open science, we can utilize some best practices. Open science best practices extend beyond open access publishing to the entire research lifecycle, from initial planning to data analysis and publication. We're going to step through this lifecycle and describe some of the best practices associated with each. The first open science best practice that we will cover today is pre-registration. Pre-registration is the practice of documenting your research and analysis plan at the beginning of your study and storing it in a read-only public repository. The benefits of pre-registration include reduced hindsight bias, increased transparency, and improved scientific rigor. The second open science best practice is using open source code and software during data collection and processing to the extent possible. Research software are tools used to collect, process, and analyze data. This includes any source code, files, algorithms, scripts, and computational workflows or executables that were created during the research process. Research software should be treated as a resource that must be managed with all other aspects of research. In addition to sharing source code in a public repository like GitHub, researchers should utilize version control. All work done on a computer for a project should be tracked using a version control system, including file name changes and reorganization. This allows the history of all code and operations to be tracked. Code should also include comments so that it is understandable to a reader who is familiar with the language. Finally, the code should be shared in an interactive environment like a Jupyter notebook or a reproducible container with a Docker file so that someone else can easily rerun your code in the same computational environment you used. The benefits of using open source code and software include increased collaboration, improved flexibility and customization, increased transparency and reproducibility, and increased interoperability. The third open science best practice is using public repositories to assign persistent identifiers to newly generated data, code, protocols, and key lab materials. Persistent identifiers, or PIDs, are unique identifiers, usually a string of letters and numbers, that permanently and unambiguously identify something in a way that is easily machine readable. Different types of PIDs exist to distinguish specific entities. Examples of persistent identifiers include digital object identifiers, or DOIs, accession numbers, research resource identifiers, or RIDs, and open researcher and contributor IDs, or ORCIDs. Datasets, code, protocols, and articles are assigned DOIs, or accession numbers. To assign a DOI or accession number to data, deposit the dataset to a publicly accessible, community-recognized repository. This may be discipline-specific, like AMP-PD, or a generalist repository like Zenodo. For protocols, upload the recipe-style protocol to a repository that provides a DOI, like protocols.io, or publish a detailed methods paper of the protocol. For code, upload the code to a repository like GitHub. However, because GitHub does not mint a DOI, you should therefore use the data archiving tool Zenodo to archive a repository on GitHub and issue a DOI for that version of the code. Otherwise, the code can be deleted and become inaccessible to others. Preprint servers and journals mint DOIs for preprints and publications. Software and lab materials, including animal models, cell lines, plasmids, and antibodies, can be assigned RIDs. To assign an RID for any of these, register the tool with the appropriate repository, some of which are listed on the slide. For newly generated lab materials, it may also be beneficial to deposit the material with the repository to ensure long-term storage, quality control, and distribution of lab materials. The benefits of using persistent identifiers include increased discoverability and long-term preservation, and increased transparency and reproducibility. The fourth open science best practice is to include descriptive metadata. Metadata is information about the data needed to allow anyone, now or in the future, to be able to understand the structure and content of the dataset and reuse it. Metadata should be formatted in a standard machine-readable format. Some disciplines and repositories have required metadata fields that may include when and how data was collected, definitions of units of measurements, variables, and acronyms, relationships between files, software dependencies, file naming conventions and formats, and descriptions of data in each file. Metadata should be specific enough that it differentiates from any other similar dataset. The benefits of sharing descriptive metadata include increased reusability and long-term preservation of data for future reuse. Shared data may be preserved for the future, but without good metadata, it cannot be used for future discovery. The fifth open science best practice is ensuring links between publications, data, code, protocols, and lab materials. Linkage allows identification of relationships between and across publications, preprints, data, code, protocols, and key lab materials, both new and reused. To ensure linkage, share the preprint DOI in the publication and vice versa. You should also include the preprint or publication DOI when depositing a research output, such as data or code. Finally, share persistent identifiers for all datasets, code, protocols, and lab materials, both new and reused, in the publication. To find persistent identifiers for reused data, software, protocols, and lab materials, you can search the RID portal. ASAP recommends sharing all persistent identifiers for new and reused data, code, protocols, and key lab materials in one place, the key resource table. The KRT can be uploaded to Zenodo and updated as needed with the DOI cited in the publication. The benefits of ensuring linkage include increased number of citable research outputs, improved reproducibility, and ensuring credit. Our sixth open science best practice is to upload preprints and publish open access articles. An article is considered open access when anyone can read, download, copy, distribute, print, search for, and search within the information. There are several routes to open access publishing. In the gold route, researchers publish their article in an open access journal and pay an article processing charge, or APC. The hybrid route is similar. However, the journal is a subscription-based journal with a paid open access option. In the green route, also known as self-archiving, researchers publish their article in a closed access subscription-based journal and then self-archive the article to an institutional repository or a discipline-specific repository. In this case, access could be immediate or delayed due to embargo periods set by the publisher. To check if a journal is open access or not, use the Open Access Finder tool. The benefits of publishing open access include democratized access to research, increased transparency, improved collaboration, and increased reach and impact of research. The seventh open science best practice is to license articles, data, code and software, protocols, and key lab materials for reuse. A copyright license is a legal agreement that determines the conditions of reuse of intellectual or creative work. Reuse includes reproduction, distribution, adaptation, or translation. The license that can be used varies by research output type. However, you should ensure it allows others to freely share, adapt, remix, distribute, and translate the work. Some recommended licenses are listed on the slide. Note that licenses with ND, NC, and SA modifiers are not considered licenses that allow for unrestricted reuse. The benefits of applying licenses that allow for reuse of research outputs includes encouraging broad dissemination of research, improved reusability, increased transparency, and democratized access to research. Open science best practices increase reproducibility, transparency, and discovery by making the processes and outputs of scientific research findable, accessible, and reusable. This democratizes access to research, allowing others to build upon the work of those who came before, opening up new avenues for innovation and accelerating discovery. This course was an introduction to open science best practices. If you are interested in learning more about how to implement these practices in your research, check out the ASAP Open Science Guides on Zenodo. Thank you.